May our hearts and minds be open to hear the word of God in Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. Don't be in debt to anyone except for the obligation to love each other. Whoever loves another person has fulfilled the law. The commandments: don't commit adultery, don't murder, don't steal, don't desire what others have, and any other commandments are all summed up in one word: you must love your neighbor as yourself. Love doesn't do anything wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is what fulfills the law. This is the word of God for all the people of God. Thanks be to God. Good morning, everyone, and I am Arlene Turner. This summer, our church offered a discussion group that addressed issues in racism as presented by leaders at the forefront of these issues. I hope to present some of the topics discussed in the framework of today's passage from Romans. When I first heard this passage from Romans, I thought there was something wrong in this statement from Paul, the author of this letter to the Romans. I didn't want anyone loving me the way they loved themselves, because they did not love themselves. They hurt themselves, both physically and emotionally. After studying the passage over and over, I realized I had the wrong perspective. We must learn how to love ourselves so that we can be loving to others. The pain, hurts, injustices endured, bullying, anger, disappointments, betrayal, guilt, shame, remorse, regrets, doubts, and low self-esteem interfere with our ability to be fully present, to observe others in need of love and responding with words and responding with loving words and actions. Just like on a plane, the flight attendant instructs you to put on your mask first before helping your child put on their mask. Because if you faint, then you'll be of no help to anyone. We too need to care for ourselves and heal our own wounds before we can be there for another. We can start with the internalization that we are beloved. We are each equally the apple of God's eyes. We are each equally worthy of love. Our identity is first and foremost how God sees us, which is not by the value of our work, but by the immense value we have because we were made in the image of God and are a reflection of God in the world. A Jewish counselor once told me, "We are the shiniest, most beautiful car, but every time the broken world hurts us and treats us unfairly, it's like dirt being thrown onto the car." Sometimes we have had so many hits by life that the car is unrecognizable and discarded to the junkyard, only because its beauty was hidden. The New Testament is peppered with references of being transformed and maturing in faith. What I think today's verse meant is that we first have to love ourselves by constantly going to the car wash to process and resolve the brokenness in us. First, seek God, whether through Bible study, praying sessions, meditation. Recently, I found 2 great Christian meditation apps. One even includes Christian bedtime stories. I'm asleep before they're done. But God also created us as intelligent beings, and our dirty car might need rehabilitation, support groups, anger management classes, counseling, therapy, yoga, or exercise. Use whatever means available to help transform our brokenness into a state of shalom, meaning wholeness, healing, peace, and purpose. We will never accomplish complete healing on earth, but the more we work on ourselves, the better we can love others and change the world. Now we can look at the second part, which was first, namely that we have an obligation to love each other. If our identity is a beloved child of God, let us remember that every person, whether our cousin, co-worker, food deliverer, or the homeless person begging at the traffic intersection, is also a beloved child of God. In Matthew 25:40, Jesus states, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Every person is a reflection of Christ. As we encounter others throughout the day, be reminded that although we may have done the work to clean our car, the person confronting us might not have done any work. They might not know God and realize their true value. They might still be walking around with all their hurts and injustices. How many times might they have been told that they are not worthy, not good enough, not even allowed to participate at the table? They are walking around with their backpacks full of disappointments, rejections, unfair treatment, closed doors, and stolen opportunities. And this baggage might be experienced as disillusioned, in despair, angry, violent, and even hateful. One of the most loving acts that we can do is to listen to their stories. By listening instead of talking or fixing them, you are exercising the ultimate kindness and act of love. One of the repeating themes in the New Testament is the necessity of forgiveness, not only for the one forgiven, but also for the one forgiving, because we are all imperfect. Loving others requires asking for forgiveness and granting forgiveness. In the series, we were reminded that forgiveness does not mean sweeping the issue under the carpet. It does not mean that we stop working for change in an unjust system. It is just a starting point for engendering relationship. Thirdly, we love one another by being the peacemaker. Romans 18:12 encourages us that if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Our responsibility is to love one another, requires that when possible, be the one that extends the hand of peace. And if you want advice on being a peacemaker, ask Reverend Nikki, because she shines in peacemaking skills, even seeing in advance when a situation might stir unrest and taking the time to make phone calls and pave the way for a peaceable solution. We are called to love ourselves, love one another, and love your neighbor. So why is this so important? The pandemic has shown us how one careless choice can be lethal to so many others. In the same way, one act of love can have a ripple effect. Sometimes just one caring word can turn a life around, bringing the kingdom of God near just requires acts of love. Do not be afraid, say a prayer, and plunge right in. Show your love and make a tremendous difference. We are called to love our neighbors. We love our neighbors when we build bridges with other cultures, creeds, races, and gender identities. We meet in the middle and honor each person's contribution, which is essential to building relationships. There's no better way to build relationship than by breaking bread. This church shines in serving others, whether financial support, creating a home for refugee family, food pantry donations, and period parties to organize packets of feminine hygiene products, which are being collected this week. A further step could be to not only give, but to find ways to break bread together with them. Perhaps we can host a thank you dinner for all the people who helped make the Bethany Food Pantry such a success. How can we not only give, but find points of relating to each other and learn their stories, their hopes, and their dreams? Those who have been jailed at home, working in place, can perhaps take the time to evaluate their office relationships, injustices in the workplace, and rude behavior, and use this pivotal time to return to the workplace with a new dance, with a new approach to office relationships and company policies. As the 2020 census gears to tally the results, we know that our country is heading towards a population which will no longer have a white minority. And today's politics reflect those who fear that reality. But there are glimpses of hope for our children. Although many churches are still segregated, classrooms are not. And our children are learning to work together with all of God's children. Perhaps we can break down some walls in our churches by organizing representatives of our church to worship with other churches and then share their experiences. Perhaps we could trade Anna for another pastor for one Sunday and see how they embody Christ. We have a great opportunity this coming election to prayerfully make informed choices when casting our votes and making a significant difference. Love is speaking the truth. Now, we will probably not be able to speak up for justice in every arena, but drawing on the courage of our relationship with God, we are called to look for unjust practices in the schools, on the soccer field, in dance classes, and then in the associations and organizations we already attend. One of the most powerful videos we saw was of a Christian Palestinian woman whose community had been devastated. Because they were not wanted on the land, their electricity and water supply were cut off. Because they would not leave their ancestral homes, their livelihood, their orchard was cut down, and the overturned trees buried their harvest. But instead of taking arms, they planted trees because they refused to be enemies. They planted trees as a signpost of hope for peace. How they react to each new threat is based on their decision to refuse to be enemies. Given our current confrontation with the police, perhaps both sides could find solutions if they came to the table refusing to be enemies. Romans 12:21 advises us, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Sounds simple, but it definitely is not simple or easy. Loving others demands that we make choices that takes work and commitment. God does not expect us to be perfect. He knows us too well. We are encouraged to take up our best weapon against violence and injustice, which is love. Love of self and love of others, made possible through the power, strength, and courage we find in our love of God.